Bob, your son Stacey is here. And she got his attention. He looked at that, and then all of a sudden, and I waved at him. He goes, "What are you doing here?" And Al, for 90 seconds, I got down on my knees and I got this far from his face, and we connected. Knew this would probably happen. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. Just your heart.
Yeah, but I guess the message I want to give to people is you never know when God's going to show up and give you something. So the interesting thing for me after that is I was able to let go, and I'm able to today, even though I get a little emotional describing the experience because it was just that rich in my soul and my heart. Got a chance to tell him I love him, and he said it back.
That when we process life as a cherry pie, and if you take a bigger piece of pie, there's less for me, it's a scarcity mindset. In a way, the resistance to letting go is a scarcity mindset. It's saying that I'm never going to have this joy again. You're never going to have the warmth and connection of a father with all the loving times as well as the heavy times. That's going away forever, and so there's a tragedy. It is the source of suffering because we end up trying to make permanent that which is intrinsically impermanent.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Stacey Harding and Al Colleen bringing you another episode of Fourth Level Conversations. Al, how are you this morning?
I'm good. What is this episode, Stacey? Is this number 4 or 5?
I think this is number 4.
Number 4, okay. I'm good. You and I had a chance to talk a little bit before this, and I was just sharing with you how grateful, I guess is the right word, I am that we are doing these together. We've come into this relationship. You're now doing Hourglass Consulting with what I believe is really kind of something you've spent 40 years preparing to do, maybe giving yourself permission to do, and as I did with my career. And it's just such a delight to, the listeners, the viewers of this, I'll tell you all a little secret. Don't tell Stacey I'm telling you this. That right before this, I told him one of the things I'm really grateful for and that I've really enjoyed is getting to know that authentic, innocent farm kid that came out of a small town in Kansas 50 years ago, or wherever it was, because I never knew that guy. I knew the public image, I knew the persona, I knew all the accomplishments, and I knew all the great golf game and the good looks and all the accolades. But it's really delightful to kind of get to know the real Stacey beyond. What we all have a tendency to do in life is to present ourselves with a posture and a presentation we think other people want us to be acceptable in the world, professionally or whatever. And Stacey, you're just such an authentic guy. It's a delight to get to be with you in this phase of the journey. And it sets up our topic for today, which is how do you, the listener, the viewer, how do you relate to the process of letting go in life? And is that coming from your level 3 or your level 4? And what the heck is the difference? So, Stacey, why don't you say what you need to say to kind of open this up and start to launch us in the direction of exploration of this idea of letting go? And is it a bad thing or a good thing or both?
Yeah, it's interesting, Al. All I can do is really speak from my own experiences and perspective and how I've thought and so forth. But it has been a common theme in my life to try to manufacture my life and how to create certain outcomes. And, the reality is about 99% of what we experience in life often is outside of our control. And yet we still think we need to control it. And so I think when we don't let go of certain things, it creates frustration, suffering, certainly. And most of the times we hide it. And that's where I think despair comes in, and it's often hidden because we're portraying this image that we think the world expects of us.
Right.
Maybe we're taught to expect that growing up and so forth. And the reality is sometimes it's worked, right? We portray ourselves as something and good things have happened. And the theme of being authentic for you and I has been a common discussion. And the reality is that's the only way to really uncovering true values and true purpose and honestly peace and freedom, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so we did want to talk this week about this idea of letting go. And oftentimes we think that that's a bad thing, that if I let go of that, I won't be able to control the outcome and then it won't be good in my life, or I won't experience something that I have enjoyed in the past or want to. And I think we look at the future that way, don't we, Al? We think about, well, this is what I want. And so I start putting these conceptions about what should happen and all those things, and oftentimes only to be disappointed. And I think it gets in the way of God in our lives. And I'm going to share a story that, I'm going to share this morning about an experience that I've had in the last week, that me getting out of the way and letting go let something really beautiful and amazing happen.
Well, let's hear that story, brother.
All right. Well, like me, I'm sure all of you who are watching have aging parents and you've lost loved ones. In fact, I know of friends that have lost parents within short periods of time from one another recently. And that is so hard, particularly given the time of year. But I've got a situation where my father, who was very involved and active in my life for all of my life, has gone through some things over the last 6 to 7 years that have been hard to watch, and quite frankly, have been hard for me to let go and just let life happen. So my father retired at the age of 62 and started living the life of retirement and lots of golf, and moved to Arizona from Kansas with my stepmother, and really enjoyed a couple of decades of what you might say a rewarded life ought to get. And unfortunately, my stepmother developed cancer and fought a very valiant battle for, I think, around 9 years, and unfortunately passed away about 6 or 7 years now. She was my dad's whole life at that point, and it devastated him. And I stepped in and played a role of, I guess, protector to some degree because of the emotional damage that he experienced from that and his inability to cope very well. We spoke multiple times a day for 3 or 4 years in a row. Sometimes you're glad to have times with your parents, and other times you're like, it's too much. And honestly, during that time, it was very taxing. But there was this sense of responsibility on my part and my sister's parts of, we got to protect him because he's in his 80s. He's emotionally not capable of coping with this at this point. And he was very self-destructive, refused to participate in anything that would lift his spirits, etc. And quite frankly, he was a social creature his entire life, and he really, really withdrew. And I think there's some lessons for me in all this. And this is that just because you have, a size of a world in your life for a long period of time, it doesn't mean that it won't shrink and shrink fast if you don't stay engaged in life, if you don't remain committed to a purpose. And I just unfortunately saw my dad kind of lose that, and I don't fault him for it. I mean, it's a hard thing to go through when you lose the most important person in your life over that many years. So unfortunately, over the last couple of years, he's now 88, and he lives in a facility in Goodland, Kansas, which is where he was born and raised. My sister and her family are there. And he is literally willing himself to die at this point. And he will almost refuse to get out of bed and eat unless they really insist that he do that. And I had a chance to go visit him this past weekend. And he's kind of in a comatose state almost, in the sense of his mind is so done with life that he lays in his bed and his eyes are open and he just stares. And we can stir him a little bit to get his attention. And he's frustrated when that happens, honestly. And again, I'm not faulting him for any of this. It's just his present reality. And I would visit him about 10 months ago, and he really didn't recognize me. And I didn't really get any connection with him. Well, this time when my sister and I visited, we were there for about a half hour, and he wasn't realizing I was there or anything. And God bless the person there, the caretaker that came in, and she took a little white chalkboard and she wrote on the board, Bob, your son Stacey is here. And she got his attention. He looked at that, and then all of a sudden, and I waved at him. He goes, "What are you doing here?" And Al, for 90 seconds, I got down on my knees and I got this far from his face, and we connected. Knew this would probably happen. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. Just your heart. Okay.
Yeah, but I guess the message I want to give to people is you never know when God's going to show up and give you something. So the interesting thing for me after that is I was able to let go, and I'm able to today, even though I get a little emotional describing the experience because it was just that rich in my soul and my heart. Got a chance to tell him I love him, and he said it back. So anyway, I think the lessons for me is like let go and let God, and you'll never know when something's going to show up in your life that you'll cherish. I'll never forget that. Never forget that. But the other part is I don't want to find myself in a similar situation down the road. And my dad probably wasn't a person that was committed to lifelong learning. And I think that has a big deal to do with how we spend the final days of our life, is to continue to learn to the very end and stay committed to purpose and the people that want to help you and all those things. So I love my dad, and he's had a wonderful long life, some great things and some challenges, just like everyone. But I'm at a point where I have learned I can let go of the fact that he's okay.
Wow,
He's
beautiful story. Thank you for.
Bless my sister and her family. They're there all the time. And they probably have more experiences than I've had with watching him deteriorate. But that was a moment I'll never forget.
What a poignant story. And I think what it brings up for me is, what's the difference, Stacey? You and I are having these podcasts and these conversations with people, and we're just putting them out in the world for whatever good they happen to do for whoever happens to listen to them in whatever way that goes. And so we talked last time about the 4 levels of identity and the difference between level 3 ego-based identity, which is most of us most of the time, and level 4 values-based, soul-based identity. What do you see as the difference between the level 3 response to having to let go of things in life, people, careers, relationship, health, life itself, that from a level 3 ego perspective versus a level 4 values / soul perspective? What's the difference? How does letting go change from level 3 to level 4 in your opinion?
Yeah. For me, in my experience, Al, and just the things I've learned from you and others in my life, I think level 3 responds to things like this by focusing on ourselves. I could have gone through that experience with him and said, I traveled all this way and he can't even sit up in his bed and talk to me when I know he actually can. So level 3 could be, it's all about me and how I feel and what didn't I get, or did somebody offend me? Those kinds of things. I think level 4 is it's about the grand picture. It's about the world and the well-being of others and the positive influence that we can have in every circumstance. It's so funny because as I was with my family a little later that day and we were describing this deal, one of my nieces said, well, he'll remember that. And I said, no, he won't. He won't remember it, but his soul will. His soul will. His mind will not remember it. He will not. Today, he would have no memory of me being there, because after that 90 seconds, he went right back into his comatose vegetative state, so to speak. But his soul knows, his heart, and that's part of the bigger world, universe, eternity, all of those things. And I have no doubt that that moment was an important experience in his life as well as mine.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. Well, what strikes me as we're having this conversation is that you and I have been around for a while, so we remember a guy named Woody Allen that has done a lot of movies, and there's a lot of younger folks that may watch this that don't know who the hell Woody Allen is, which is fine. Well, Woody Allen did a movie back, I'm thinking in the 70s, called Take the Money and Run. And it was sort of a farce on a guy who was a criminal, but a bad criminal, Woody Allen, who was just a bad criminal. And in one of the scenes in life in the movie, he's talking about how he was always kind of out of step with life. And so one of the things he pointed out that he tried to do was to play a cello in a marching band. And so he'd have a cello in a chair and he'd run ahead of the band and put it down and squeak out a few notes as the band walked by him. And then he'd pick up the chair and cello and run ahead of the band. And I don't know why that image kind of comes to mind for me, because that to me is what level 3's relationship is with letting go. And we all have to learn how to become masters of letting go, not just endure it if we're going to trust life. I think our relationship with letting go reveals our relationship with faith.
Mm-hmm.
Not just faith in God, but faith in the future, faith in yourself, faith in other people, faith that there's a larger guided benevolent intelligence behind the macro system of which we're all a part, we call God or source or the universe or divinity or whatever. And so with level 3, we treat life, the Buddha said that the source of all suffering is attachment. I think he was right. Because why? Because I think attachment to the way things are right now that I like, and we want them to stay that way forever. But every one of us has bought a nice new car that got scratched in a parking lot, or we've had a girlfriend break up with us and broken our heart, or a boyfriend break up with us, or we've had a child get into some problem that, or maybe we have a child that no longer wants a relationship with me. We're always at careers. This has been a theme for me with a lot of clients this week, of a lot of people making changes. And it's interesting, and I certainly have been through it as well, and I still am tempted to go through it, that when we process life as a cherry pie, and if you take a bigger piece of pie, there's less for me, it's a scarcity mindset. In a way, the resistance to letting go is a scarcity mindset. It's saying that I'm never going to have this joy again. You're never going to have the warmth and connection of a father with all the loving times as well as the heavy times. That's going away forever. And so there's a tragedy. It is the source of suffering, because we end up trying to make permanent that which is intrinsically impermanent. And so instead of treating life like a river that we're flowing down, where we grab the weeds on the bank when we find a particularly beautiful section of river, and we want this section to stay forever. But what happens? The current beats us against the bank. Sooner or later, we got to let go of the weed, or the weed pulls out, and we end up going down the river anyway. And it ends up feeling like something bad has happened. We feel disappointed. But maybe that's level 3's relationship with letting go. Maybe level 4's is to reconfigure that into an ocean. And now you, Stacey, like I, have probably had people in your life, your father. You've had maybe other people in your life that have come and gone. I certainly have. Dear friendships, old girlfriends, whatever. Even our children leaving home and emancipating, go out and having their own lives. What I've learned to do, or I'm trying to increasingly do, is look at life less like a river where I'm going to be tempted to attach to segments, and more like an ocean. And that there are people and situations in our life that the currents take over the horizon. There are people in this life that I love and that I've had long, wonderful relationships with, I'll never see again. Okay, what do I do with that? Well, if I let them drift over the horizon, but no, they're still on the same ocean that I'm on, and that all the oceans are connected, representing eternity and representing the connectedness we all have in God. Letting go then becomes an opportunity for allowing divinity, source, God, the universe, to open up what is next for us on our intrinsic path of growth and learning and meaning. And therefore, letting go, just like leaving childhood behind and all those wonderful Christmases when you still believed in Santa Claus, letting go of the myth of Santa Claus, what does that do? It opens up a new context for Well, why do we make that up in the first place? And what's the spirit of Santa Claus? Oh, it's giving between each other out of love, and Santa Claus is symbolic, and blah, blah, blah. So letting go is growth at level 4. It's suffering at level 3, in my opinion. What do you think, Stacey?
Yeah, 100%. And Al, I think oftentimes in our discussions, I think people could feel that it sounds like a good perspective to have, but how in the world do I do that? And, you know, Al and I have both been dedicated to building businesses and growing people and growing results. And so when we talk, we're never saying you shouldn't plan or you shouldn't have objectives and you shouldn't have disciplines and all those things. Of course you should. And for those business leaders that might be watching, I promise you, all of this is in line with leadership and all those things. Um, but it is a battle for our minds. And I guess the first thing that we have to think about how to move from level 3 to level 4 is desire to do it. I mean, I was thinking about, I think I wrote a post yesterday about the end of the year and how everybody starts setting resolutions. Nobody says resolutions anymore. They say, oh, I want new goals and objectives. It's because resolutions go unfulfilled, right? But we all do kind of look at the next year and go, wow, it's a new year, new beginnings. And I like that. I do it too. There's something fresh. Today's winter solstice, right? First day of winter. And I think sometimes we want something new, but we don't let go of something that's holding us back from something new. And so for me, it's the level 3 stuff, right? It's pride, it's anger, it's holding a grudge, it's judgment of myself and others, it's self doubt, diminishing my self worth, it's thinking that my past is the indicator of everything in the future, and I didn't love it all that much at times. And so I think some of the letting go that we have to do at level 4 is don't carry the baggage with us. And, you know, people will say, well, that sounds good, but how the heck do you do that? Al, spend some time talking about how a person starts to move from level 3 to level 4 identity.
Great invitation and question, Stacey. In my opinion, it's about expansion. It's about expansion of perspective. What I find is sort of the silver bullet. You know, I had a guy, maybe you and I have talked about this. Have we talked about the 3 truths of the holy man on these posts, on this
I think
podcast?
so. I don't think so on these posts, no.
So, quick story, very quick story around this. almost 48 years ago, I was sitting on a cliffside outside Boulder, Colorado, going through a sacred experience with a holy man from India. And it was a 6,000-year-old ritual where he's sharing information with me and giving me a secret mantra and all these things. And we're sitting there with our feet dangling over the edge of this cliff. And he says, I have 3 truths that I want to give you, and I want you to live your life by. Will you do so? I said, yes, before I knew what they were. He said, okay, the first truth, and I'm bringing this in because I think it has to do with how to expand perspective and how to get to level 4. He said, okay, the first truth I want you to remember is doubt is the source of all suffering. And before I go on to the other 2 truths, I want to drop into this one for a minute because something big happened out of that. That never occurred to me that I was essentially creating my own suffering by my state of doubt. And so I went home that night. And before I met my beloved wife of now 45 years, I'd had other relationships, and I had a couple of girlfriends that I'd had that I was really close to, that I thought maybe this is the one or whatever. And they left me for other guys. Well, one of them was named Nancy, and I wrote her a letter that night. Living at home alone in Colorado, in Longmont, Colorado. And I write her a letter that night that basically she ran off with a guy named Robert to work in southern Colorado with migrants. So I wrote her a letter, and the letter was, Dear Nancy, don't regret that you've left, that we're done. I just want you to have a great life, and don't look back. And it's all fine. And on the outside of the envelope, I wrote this first quote, Stacey, doubt is the source of all suffering. Put it in quotes, send it to her. I figure she's going over the horizon. That's the end of the relationship with Nancy. I get a call 2 weeks later from Robert, the boyfriend she left me for, who I've never met, never talked to. 8 o'clock at night, phone's ringing. Hi, this is Al. Hi, Al, this is Robert. Hi, Robert. Why are you calling? He says, well, I'm calling because I wanted to tell you, thank you for saving my life tonight. I've never met you before, Robert. How could that be true? Let me tell you how it's true. I was looking around 5 minutes ago. I had a Smith & Wesson hammerless 38 revolver in my mouth. I was squeezing the trigger. I was leaving this world behind. And I took one last look around our living room, and I saw a coffee table with an envelope on it, upside down, thank God. And on the back of the envelope was this quote, "Doubt is the source of all suffering." And I realized in horror, I was about to create a permanent action and consequence out of a temporary state of mind. That quote saved my life. I put the gun down, I've left it down, and I want to call and thank you for saving my life, for sending Nancy that letter. And it had me thinking, Stacey, that if doubt is the source of all suffering, therefore, whatever the opposite of doubt is must accordingly be the antidote to suffering. What's the opposite of doubt, Stacey?
Yeah, belief, hope.
Yeah, I use the term faith. I think faith, the courageous festation of belief in that which isn't guaranteed. It's an act of courage to trust what you don't know is going to happen. That's the antidote to suffering. First truth of the holy man. Second truth of the holy man is that I want you to remember everybody's doing the best they can with what they have to work with all of the time. And your job isn't to judge them or fix them. It's to give them more to work with. They'll take it from there. Well, that was profound because it moved me from my level 3 ego tendency to judge people, label them based upon how much they validate my level 3 ego, over to compassion, over to a sense of appreciation, over the fact that, damn it, I don't know everything. I'm not even that smart, for gosh sakes. So, you know what? How about I give other people the space to be walking their path with God without me getting in the way of it with my petty judgments out of some shallow need for self-validation. Now, why do I bring three truths of the holy man relative to our conversation around letting go? The third truth. The third truth was in many ways the hardest one for me to accept initially, Stacey. He said, last, I want you to remember that everything in life and the universe is always and already perfect, just as it is. And it's only the limitation of our perspective on it that ever has us experience it as suffering. And that was, at first I debated in my head, how can that be true? What about the babies with leukemia? What about Hitler and the death camps, right? But all of those things, if you look at them from a larger dimension, for example, if you're of the Christian faith, you may look at the fact that this isn't really the world that matters anyway, other than kind of as a test ground to see what you're going to do with your character to see whether you're on your way into heaven or you go to hell, right? If you're a Buddhist, you might believe you come back here over and over and you're climbing a mountain of consciousness intrinsically, lifetime after lifetime, that eventually always ends up in enlightenment. If you're an atheist, but you're, let's say, an astrophysicist, you might look at the scope of the universe and realize that a light year is 6 trillion miles roughly in 1 year. It takes 100,000 of those light years just to get across our galaxy. And there's 400 billion known galaxies. We're such a small moment and spark in time. Therefore, my point being is the way for me to be able to move from 3 to 4, and frankly, even to transition my relationship with letting go from suffering to gratitude, is expansion of perspective, and to keep expanding it till I get to the level of perspective that allows me to see that third truth of the holy man and the perfection of it, despite the fact my ego's uncomfortable with the change that now it's time to have. I'll say one last thing. I'm always surprised, Stacey, honestly, when I look in the mirror and I see this old man, this old bald dude in the mirror, because that's not who I am in my head when I'm not busy looking in the mirror. I'm the same guy I was at 8, 12, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, now 71. And I think that's the consistency of my soul in the interface with the changing of my body that will one day be your dad and not be here. Probably not far in the future, given how old it is. Doesn't matter, because you and I, Stacey, and the viewers and us are having this conversation right now at this moment that's sacred and precious, because it's an opportunity to remember how to not only avoid suffering in your life, but help those out there that you love avoid suffering by expanding their perspective on situations so they don't cling to the weeds on the bank of the river. What do you think, Stacey?
Yeah, we've always heard that statement that reality is a person's perspective is reality. And I've always kind of fought that in the past, thinking, well, wait a minute. there are some physical realities. So I'll give you an example. So here in Colorado, we've got a lot of large mountains, 14ers. And if I was standing at the base of, let's say, Pikes Peak or Mount Evans, and I'm there with my 27-year-old son, soon to be 27-year-old son, we look at that mountain differently. It is actually 14,300 feet, whatever it is. To me, it looks like 20,000 feet. To him, it's 12,000 because of physical capabilities and energy in comparison to mine. And so I think there's some truth in the statement that our perception is our reality. And so all we're saying is we can grow and expand that perspective, right? It doesn't have to be limited by our past experiences or what somebody else taught and told us it should be. But to move out of that self-imposed doubt and suffering through faith, we can grow our perspectives and therefore experience level 4 identity more often. What a great thing to be doing this time of year.
Well, yes, and let's as we start to come to a close on this discussion today, Stacey, let me invite us to go back to your situation with your father. Now, from an outsider's perspective who's lost his father, his mother, his brother, his sister, everybody in my biological family is dead except for me. And so I've had some experience around this. As I go back to your situation with your father, from an outsider's perspective, your level 3 being there in the care facility with him might be running over the memory tapes of the good moments, the bad moments, the pluses, the minuses, what you did and didn't like about your relationship, what your case was against him, as well as your guilt and sadness over things you should have and could have done you didn't do. All of that goes on, I think, in level 3. In level 4, it comes with a short story. Always does. I'm Irish. There was a 19th century Indian saint named Ramana Maharshi, who was a holy man. And when he was on his deathbed with cancer, his disciples were all around him wailing and crying and whatnot. Please don't leave us, don't leave us. And he finally kind of sat up on his deathbed and said, people, what are you doing? Haven't you been listening? Where could I possibly go? Now, I've always loved that, Stacey, because it takes me back to you and your father. From level 4, your opportunity is to realize that your father is not going anywhere. His body is. His body is. But his soul is going to be in a dimension now unfettered by the pain, the loss of your mother, his beloved wife, and unfettered by the karma of his physical ego-based existence. And now he's in my belief system anyway, he's now in a dimension of freedom where he's free to soar the universe and wait until you're there too, where you'll be reunited. And therefore, it's no more than it's no different than him taking a vacation to a distant land where you're not going to see him for a few years. And that, if looked at that way, perhaps allows it not to be an experience of suffering, but no different than waving bon voyage as the airplane takes off. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. And it just comes back to the entire subject we were talking about is that nothing is permanent. There is impermanence, but it doesn't also mean there's an end. And so I think this has been a great conversation. And Al, it occurs to me that there are people perhaps watching that may be having some personal suffering themselves. Maybe they're battling depression. Maybe they're having loved ones that are. And we just want to make sure that if you're listening, that's the case, that you are worthy, you're loved. We will always have a conversation with you if you have interest in doing so. And we want the best for you, and we want you to live your best life, and we want you to grow your perspective and your level 4 identity, because that's where the beauty and freedom of life is.
That's beautiful, Stacey. That's beautiful, because Stacey with Hourglass and myself with IMP, do we do this to make a living? Only secondarily. We do this because we're both at a stage of life where we want to take what we've gathered through both really great experiences and some unpleasant experiences, and we want to help other people have some tools to expand that perspective that allows for access to their level 4, so you can trust life and have a relationship with it in this holiday season, where the holiday really becomes something more precious than just another excuse to send Amazon a lot of money and have them send you a lot of boxes. Let's remember really what we're doing here with this season. As this year ends and a new year begins, none of us know that we're going to have it tomorrow. So at least for today, let's show up as sincere and authentic experiences of love and compassion, kindness, and support for one another. That's what Hourglass Consulting is all about. That's what Integrated Mastery Programs is all about. And if you decide to reach out to us, don't hold your breath and feel like this is all just a sophisticated come on to somehow send you down the funnel of upselling you into shit. It isn't that. You may or may not become a client of ours, and we have a lot of ways to support clients. But you know what? That doesn't vary the support we give people to contact us.
Right.
Our game isn't we'll only help you if you pay us money. Our game is we will only help you if you desire the help and you are ready to do what's necessary for you to experience a life of meaning, of gratitude, and frankly, of inspirational relationship with yourself and others, God as you see God, and life as a whole. Stacey,
Yeah.
bring us home here as we close this.
Yeah, I think Al just said it right. And I'd go a little further. Reach out to us, engage with us. We promise you this authentic thing we're talking about and our level 4 identity of wanting to just make a difference in your life and in the world, it's real. We don't care whether you become a client or not. We just want to engage with you and help you have a great journey as we're pursuing ourselves. So great time being with you, Al. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Until next time.
I'll see you. Merry Christmas, by the way, everyone. And Stacey, I'll see you all next week. I'll see you next week, brother.
Fantastic. Have a great day, everybody.